and welcome back to What's Mili Making. I'm Mili and this is Knitting Podcast episode 4. So in today's video, I'll be talking about the projects that I finished since the last time I recorded, what's currently on my needles, including my sock knitting mojo gone, I don't know what this is. My current sock knitting obsession, let's say it, as well as a little bit of a sneak peek at the acquisitions that I got from my vacation. So speaking of finished objects, I do have a little bit of a question for you. So this channel is technically called What's Mili Making, not What's Mili Knitting. And I did recently start sewing. I only have 2 sewing finished objects and I'm not going to talk about them today. And I also do want to learn how to crochet this summer. So the question is, if I do crochet anything, I'll probably include it in the video. But if I wanted to talk about what I was sewing, would I include it in my knitting podcast episodes, or would you rather it be in a separate video? Because I know a lot of times when I watch knitting podcasts, if the people include crafts that I'm not familiar with, depending on like my timing and interest in those crafts, sometimes I will just like fast forward through those parts. Or I like when people have chapters in the video, so I know like, okay, wait, maybe I'm not interested in this right now, I just want to hear about the knitting. So I guess I would like to know completely separate videos for sewing, or include them in the videos but like have separate chapters so that if you don't want to watch that, you don't have to. And I think that's all I have to say about that. It's been a while since I've recorded, like 2.5 months, and I was also away for over a month on a trip, so I do have some like post-vacation fog, so apologies in advance if I'm a bit rusty and forgetful. As always, if you see me looking down, it is because I have to see my notes, because otherwise I will be even ramblier than I am as this. Okay, first up we have finished objects. So I have 2 finished objects that I don't have with me right now because I packed them away before I went on my trip, but because I talked about them in previous episodes, I think they are worth mentioning. Do I have fuzz in my lip gloss? Ugh. First up, we have the Wave Sweater by Spectacle Strick. And if you saw my previous episodes, you know this one was a little bit of an albatross around my neck. The combination of just knitting with chunky needles, chunky yarn on small circumference made knitting the sleeves quite an unenjoyable experience for me, and I just couldn't knit on the sleeves very long without getting hand cramps. So it just took me a long time to finish, but alas, I did finish it right after it got too warm for me to wear such a sweater, and I didn't weave in any of the ends, I didn't block it, I literally just bound off and packed it away. And I'm sure once it starts getting a little cooler, like August, September, or honestly with like our current weather patterns, October. Anyways, once it does start getting cooler, I will take it out, block it, yada yada yada. I do still have like a lot of footage that I filmed when I was knitting this sweater, so if there is any interest, slash even if there's not interest but I just like feel like sharing it anyways, I could share a project vlog on this sweater. I did make a lot of modifications to the sweater, I think, because I don't think the sweater came with any schematics, but while I was knitting it, I started to realize that the yoke would be really big, so I had adjusted the way that the yoke was knit. And I think also the colorwork gauge on this was quite loose, but I think the recommended needle size is like 4.5mm needles on a 16 stitch gauge. I can't hit that doing color work, so I had to size up my needles a lot, and that meant my row gauge was a bit looser also than the pattern. I don't know. Basically, there was all this confusion about there not being schematics and like some of the information between the Ravelry page for the pattern and the pattern itself not lining up, and just the sizing on me being weird. I think like there was a lot of stitches for the arms. I also had to modify the arms. I don't know. Basically, I did a whole lot of modifications to make this sweater fit me better, and I do think it ultimately turned out, but there are also some things I would change. All that said, if you want to see that video, do let me know. And then the second finished sweater I have was a much more enjoyable knitting experience, and I do have pictures of myself wearing the blocked finished object. It is sweater number 23 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and this is my 3rd time knitting this sweater, and this version was knit with Woolfolk too, and the yarn was gifted to me from the brand for a knit along that they were doing, and I just love the sweater pattern. I love the process of making it, I love wearing it, and I love the yarn. So it was just like an all around very enjoyable experience for me. And I've never knit with the yarn like this before. It is like a wool mohair blend, and it has like a very soft matte sort of finish, because when you think silk mohair, you think shiny because the silk makes it shiny, but this yarn doesn't have any of the silk content, only the mohair. So you get the fluff without the shininess, and the resulting fabric is just like very, very light. I really, really like how this sweater turned out. I think the only change I might make is I might lengthen the neck and just make it a turtleneck. I have a store-bought black turtleneck sweater that I wear a ton, and obviously I would like to have a hand knit version, which would be even nicer. I did talk about this sweater quite a bit in my previous episode. I talked about this black version that I knit, but I had also just finished a red version. So if you want to hear me talk more about like why I like the construction of this sweater and the process of making it and all that stuff, you can watch that episode. Okay, my next two finished objects are ones that I did finish in June. First up, I have the Vertices Unite Shawl by Stephen West. Here she is, currently unblocked, but I did weave in all the ends, and she is glorious. This is a modular shawl. I think I really prefer this shawl construction because I think a lot of times shawls turn into a slog because you just have hundreds and hundreds of stitches on each row. Because I feel like a very popular shawl construction is you start out small and then you just like continuously increase before binding off. And towards the end, like when I knit that pressed flower shawl, I remember it was just taking me forever because the rows like later on have hundreds and hundreds of stitches, I was saying. So it could take me like a half an hour or like an hour to knit each row, and I just kind of like lose my motivation at that point. But because this is knit modularly, I never ran into that problem. Basically, you start off with the biggest section, which was this pink and white stripe section. It's like a really big triangle. Oh, did I mention this is all garter stitch, which I think makes it even more of like a head empty, no thoughts, mindless knitting kind of project. So you start off with the biggest section, and then for each subsequent section, you just pick up stitches. And not only is it really fun to knit, it's also a great stash buster. So I think the pattern recommends having 5 100-gram skeins of fingering weight yarn. And I personally only had 2 100-gram skeins of fingering weight yarn that I wanted to use in this project. The good thing about this project is because there's so many people who have made it before, there's so many Ravelry project notes to go through, and there are people who have gone through and shared exactly how many grams they used for each section. Well, I did for 2 of my colors, I did use like full skeins. I mean, I had leftovers of them, but I started off with full skeins. The other 3 colors, I used a mix of like mini skeins and leftovers from other projects. As for the specific yarns themselves, I do have them all listed in my Ravelry project page. Yeah, my Ravelry project page for this project. I didn't need to say the second part of that sentence. Okay, whatever, you get what I'm saying. It is a mix of hand-dyed, it's all fingering weight superwash merino, I think. Superwash yarn, fingering weight superwash yarn. And there is some Sandnes Garnet baby wool in here, as well as the rest of it is all hand dyed. And I do remember like this pink section was 1 mini skein, and this was from a Playful Days yarn sock set or like mini skein set, as well as the mini skein that I used in this section. I just love her colors, and specifically her hydrangea collection, which these mini skeins were from. I think the most intimidating part of this project was probably the I-cord bind off, because you have to first pick up stitches all the way around. I mean, some of the stitches you have kept live on the needles after you finish knitting that section, but For the majority of the sections, I think you have to go through and pick up the stitches, and then you have to knit the I-cord border all around. And I was a little bit afraid that would take me forever, but I was determined to get at least one big project off my needles in June. So when I came home from my trip, I basically like powered through the last section and the I-cord bind off in 2 days, and we have this beautiful finished shawl. I have been waiting to block this because I kept wanting to record this podcast and I didn't want to have it wet when I was recording. So now that I'm recording this, I can finally block it. I have no idea how much it's going to grow. I'm wearing foundation right now, so I don't really want to like wrap it around my face, but I think it'll be so cozy to wear like at my desk, or because it does have like a longer shape, I honestly wear shawls like this. I should say, I think this is the only shawl I have in like this kind of shape. But whatever shawl I have, I tend to just like wrap it around my face and my head and just wear it like a scarf. Because I don't really know how to wear shawls. Like, if I wear it over my shoulders like this doesn't feel like me. 5 out of 5 stars for the pattern, the fun of making it. I will definitely get use out of the finished object. Great stash buster, and I can definitely see myself making more of these in the future. And I do think that Stephen West has a few other modularly knit patterns, and I will definitely be looking into those. I don't know if all of them, some of them might have more complicated stitch patterns, so probably would not be best for me to dive into that because I do not have a history of finishing those shawls. 2022 Mystery Knit Along, which is in the depths of my yarn stash, but we won't talk about that right now. But yeah, having a garter stitch knit shawl, a very great mindless project. That was my only big project that I finished in June. My next finished object are a pair of vanilla socks, and as you might be able to tell, they have not been blocked. I did weave in the ends, but I like to weave in the ends. I try my best to weave in the ends, and then I'll block it, and then I will cut the yarn. I don't know, I feel paranoid about cutting the yarn before I block it, because like what if I'm like zhuzhing it when it's wet and then it becomes undone? I don't know, that's my paranoia. Do you cut your yarn before you block? Like I said, vanilla socks, I didn't follow any sock pattern. I just did a 2x2 rib cuff, which is my preference. And then for the heels and toes, I do like following the steps, but not the stitch count of Summer Lee's I'm So Basic socks, which is my favorite, just like free, basic, fingering weight vanilla sock pattern. Even though these socks are incredibly basic, they'll always be special to me because they will remind me of my trip. I bought the yarn, which is a Regia Tweed sock yarn. Hopefully you can see. If you cannot, I will insert better B-clip. B-clip, is that what it's called? I will insert better B-roll footage so you can see the tweedy bits in this sock yarn. So like I said, as I was saying, this is Regia Tweed sock yarn. It has quite like a woolly wool feel to it, which I personally really, really like for sock yarn because first of all, it doesn't like slip and slide around as much on my metal needles, and two, it just feels sturdier. Like I feel like it will be less prone to felting or tearing into holes because it is like a sturdier wool. And I bought this sock yarn while I was in Bruges. It was I think around like €8, and then I know I had looked at this sock yarn before because I think like Tiffany of Typical Bliss raved about it like a year or two ago, and it's $20 in the US. So that was a steal. As I was saying, I bought it in Bruges and then I cast on sock 1 on the way to Paris, and then I finished knitting it in Paris. I spent like a day at the Louvre, and a large part of the sock was knit there. I even made like a little reel about it if you want to watch that on Instagram. And then the second sock I knit while traveling through the UK. So these are like my little vacation memento socks. I would repurchase the yarn again if I was traveling somewhere that I could get it in like the under $10 price point, because it's a nice sock yarn, but I feel like for $20, like I could just get hand-dyed sock yarn for a few dollars more. So I don't know, it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't really make sense to get a commercial sock yarn for that expensive. My next finished object are quite possibly my next finished object has been a game changer for me. I just finished these yesterday. These are a pair of DK weight vanilla socks that I knit toe up. I'm a convert. I'm a convert. So one of my local yarn stores, Yarnia, they have their own podcast, and this year they're doing something called Sock Bingo, where they came out with like a bingo board and it has all different things pertaining to socks. And the goal is to knit 5 individual socks from June 1st, I think, until like September 1st or 2nd, something like that. Honestly, this bingo board has inspired me to go past like my usual like 2x2 rib, top down vanilla sock, aka this sock, because I do want to fill out this bingo board. So on that bingo board, there is DK weight socks, there's short row heels, there's toe up socks, and this is how this project was born. I have only knit one sock toe up before, and I really didn't enjoy it because I don't enjoy is it the Turkish cast on or like Jenny's something cast on. I don't know. It's one of those cast ons where it looks very, very clean, but it can be a little bit confusing for me to get. Like if it's not the long tail cast on or the cable cast on or like cast on with a crochet hook, I usually cannot do it. Like don't ask me to do a tubular cast on without a crochet hook because I cannot. Anywho, I did find not a pattern. I found a tutorial on YouTube that it just like made it click for me. The way that the person described it was like very, very simple, and she did it in slow motion, and I really like that tutorial, so I will link it below. So, God, this is why I need to look at my notes. I feel like this description has been so haphazard. What was I saying? Okay. The reason I did it toe up is because on the bingo board, there's a square that says toe up. So, okay, I did toe up. Then on the bingo board, there's also one that says sport weight or heavier yarn. And I had this skein of DK weight yarn in my stash that would be perfect for socks. It is the Pixie DK base by the Sheepyshire. And it is, I forget the exact percentages, and I didn't write it in my notes, but basically predominantly merino, and then it has some nylon and stellina in it. So that nylon content made me confident that I could knit a pair of socks with it. And I do have feet on the smaller size. I'm like a 6.5, 7 woman's, like a 36, 37 European shoe size. But I was easily able to get a pair of socks with 100 grams of DK weight yarn, and I did have 15 grams left over, and I actually did knit the foot a little bit too long, so I think with my next pair of DK weight socks I can knit the foot a little shorter and the leg a little longer, which is good to know. Oh, I tried a new to me heel construction, which is a Flegel heel, and I really, really like it. It has like a similar shape to a, what's it, heel turn and gusset, which is my preference for a heel that fits best when I do cuff down socks. So it has like a shape reminiscent of that. However, you do not pick up any stitches, and it is all done with short rows. So it is technically a short row heel. And not only does it fit well, because my problem is a lot of times like this part of the sock is too tight when I do a traditional short row heel or even like an afterthought heel. But I do find, because I guess this like mimics the shape of a heel turn and gusset, it has sufficient room for, is that my instep? It has sufficient room for that part of my foot. The next reason why I really love these socks is because I knit up so freaking fast. I cast on the first sock on at like 6 p.m. on the second, and then I knit like the majority of the foot while I was out and walking. So it's a great like project to take on the go. And then I just finished the sock the next day. And then yesterday was July 4th, and I knit this entire sock in a day. And I didn't even spend the whole day knitting. Like I barbecued, I went to see the fireworks, I knit on some other stuff, I went to the grocery store, like I did my stuff. I did not get hand cramps, and I finished a sock in a day. Like that is mind blowing to me. I did knit this on 3.5 millimeter needles, because I find I am a little bit of a tighter knitter, although my gauge is listening, so maybe next time I'll try 3.25 and see if I can get a tighter gauge. But overall, I'm just really, really impressed with the fit of these socks, how easy the toes and the heels were to knit up, and how quickly they knit up. And also, it was my first time knitting with a Stellina yarn, which with this abysmal lighting situation you cannot see. But again, I will try to insert better footage so you can see the sparkly bits. Do I have anything else to say about this? So the color of this yarn, which I did not mention, is Tulip Fields, and it was a store exclusive colorway for Knit Not Natter for the New Jersey Wool Walk. I don't think they have any more of this base available when I was looking, but I do think they have their fingering weight base, the Pixie fingering weight base, and maybe just like their regular sock base still available in this color. I think it's really pretty. It's like magenta orange with speckles of green, and then there's some white parts. I don't know, it's just like a really fun and pretty color, and I totally see the Tulip Fields inspiration behind the color. It's like that meme, like, hold up your knits like you're a man showing off his fishing. That's me right now. Okay, I just took a drink. Now that I'm hydrated, let's move on to works in progress. So as always, I have so many works in progress on my needles, but I will only talk about the ones that I have been actively working on for like the past month-ish. Currently, I guess I'm in my cardigan era. In my spring knitting plans video, I said I did want to knit the Calm Down Cardigan by Lily Kate France with this Retrosaria Brusca yarn, and I still would like to knit that cardigan in the future, but I did adjust my knitting plans, and instead I cast on the Ava Cardigan by Petite Knit. This was because I had initially thought that I would maybe bring this project on my trip with me, and I had never knit a saddle shoulder cardigan, and I have not knit many saddle shoulder sweaters, so I just wasn't sure if it would fit. And since I was knitting it for a deadline and not like a specific time and place to wear it, I thought the Ava cardigan would be safer because it seemed like it has the same construction as the Trotso sweater, which I love the fit of. This construction of the Ava cardigan, I don't really know what to call it because I always thought it was a contiguous sleeve construction, but then I've seen people call it I've seen people call not this specific sweater, but sweaters with similar constructions. I've seen them call it a European shoulder or sleeve. So I don't know what the proper name of it is, but if you have insights on it, please do share because I'm really interested in learning about different types of sweater construction. So the way that the yoke of this is shaped is you do start off flat, and then you're doing like rapid increases for the body, and then you stop increasing for the body, and then you start increasing for the sleeves, and then you end up with this really nice shape for the front where basically I'm wearing this t-shirt is like a drop shoulder, but basically with this sort of construction your sleeve kind of goes like that. Obviously, because this is a cardigan and a v-neck, there's a lot of knitting flat for the yoke, but I remember even when I was knitting the Terrazzo sweater, there's just a lot of knitting flat in the yoke. So this kind of sweater construction, while it does fit really well, in my opinion, to my body, it does require a lot of knitting flat. Versus like if you were to knit, because I remember when I first cast on like the Terrazzo sweater, I was still like very early on in my knitting journey, and just from like just looking at it, I was like, oh, it looks like a raglan. But then when I started knitting it, I was like, oh no, this is not a raglan. There's so much knitting flat. But all is good. I don't mind knitting flat all the time. As you can see, I did do some modifications. But there's a time I'm in a place where I'm willing to knit flat, and then sometimes I just want to do mindless stuck in it in the round. So I knit the yoke flat, and then at the point where you're basically done shaping the neckline, I modified the sweater so that I could steek it. Have I ever steeked anything in my life before? No. But is that going to stop me? Also no. So what I did is I basically followed all the directions up until that point, and then at this point your body is basically all joined, and you just knit back and forth. But what I did instead, I cast on 7 extra stitches. 2 of them I'm knitting as purl stitches, and then the middle 5 are all knit stitches. And my plan is to reinforce the stitches around that middle stitch, and then I will fold that fabric back on the purl on. We'll see if that works out. So like I said, I don't really know what I'm doing. Initially, I was planning on knitting this quite short because I wanted to wear it with summer dresses, but then I realized I have so much of this yarn. Like, I think I bought 10 balls of this yarn for a different project. So I might as well try to maximize the amount of yarn that I get from this. I don't think I want it to be too long. So initially, I thought I would want it like, I don't know, at my waist. But now I think I'm going to try to knit it to my hip. The yarn that I'm using for this project is Retrosaria Rosa Pomar Brusca, and it is a 50-50 blend of 2 different yarns that are native sheep breeds from Portugal. And I think I've mentioned this before. One of the reasons I'm really interested in Retrosaria as a brand is because they seem to really focus their efforts on local production, using local wool, spinning the stuff and spinning the yarn in Portugal, dyeing in Portugal. Like, everything that I've read about them, it just seems like they're really interested in supporting like their native wool and fiber and yarn trade, which I think is very admirable. I bought this yarn at Knit Tapestry, which is a great local yarn store in northern New Jersey. It's one of my favorite local yarn stores, even though it's not so local to me. It's worth the drive. And I think I actually talked about it in my previous video, which is about the New Jersey Wool Walk. The color that I'm using, I think, is an undyed colorway. It's colorway C, I believe. The problem is when you look on Ravelry for colorway C, other colors also show up because I think they use, like, they don't name their colors, at least in the Brusca line. I don't think they do. They assign numbers and letters to them. So this is just C. Like, this colorway is C, and then there's maybe like another colorway that's like 101C or like 300C. So when you search C on Ravelry, it pulls up all of those colorways, so it can be slightly confusing, but this is C. And this yarn is quite woolly. I believe it's sold as like a light worsted weight yarn, but I'm knitting it with 4mm needles at a DK weight gauge, and it perfectly works for that. It has a 2-ply construction. It does look rather thin, but I'm assuming that when I block it, it will plump up. It comes in 50-gram balls, and it's quite a rustic woolly wool. Like, I found a lot of vegetable matter in it while knitting, and I personally don't mind that. I actually like it. I don't know, it makes me feel like closer to the sheep and the wool, but if you're somebody who really likes like a superwash merino, maybe this might not be the yarn for you. But if you do like woolly wools, this will be the yarn for you. It is the yarn for me. Do I have anything else to say? Also, I just really, really like their yarn labels. I think they're so pretty. I love the design of it. Like, sometimes I don't want to buy a yarn if I don't like the yarn label. Like, there are some hand dyers who their yarn looks so pretty, but I don't really like the yarn label, and it makes me like less tempted to buy the yarn. I know that's so silly because the yarn label has no impact on the yarn, but that's the way my mind works. That is cardigan number 1. Cardigan number 2 is cardigan number 9. Oh, so like I was saying, I wanted to knit that cardigan on my vacation, but then when I was looking at the weather forecast for the places that I was going at first, it looked like it'd be kind of warm, spoiler alert, it looked like it would be too warm for me to bring a knit cardigan, so I kind of put that project to the side. Spoiler alert, it was not. I totally could have used a knit cardigan. It was like the perfect weather for it. And I didn't want to take the project with me because I have so many balls of yarn with it, and it just didn't seem like a good use of space. So I left that at home, and then I immediately regretted it because it was so cold. So then while I was on my trip, I bought yarn for another project, which is cardigan number 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And as you can see, I have done a decent chunk of knitting on it on my trip, but I did not finish it. The yarn that I bought for this project is Darurum Natura Gilead in the colorway Poivre et Sel, and I bought this at Lil Weasel in Paris. I'm not really like a grayish girly, but a lot of the clothes that I had packed it with me would have worked with the color of cardigan. A lot of the clothes that I packed with me would have worked with a cardigan this color, and I basically just wanted to knit something that was as versatile as possible. I don't really know if it is color that really flatters my skin tone, but that has never stopped me before from wearing something if I enjoy wearing it. So I won't worry about that right now. This is a saddle shoulder cardigan. So you cast on with two rectangles that you work as the saddles for the shoulder, as the name might imply. And then you pick up stitches from there and you have a cardigan. And I am not sure how long I want to knit this cardigan. I am planning on blocking it and then determining how long it will be because my gauge on this is a mess. I did not pack needles for this project because I was not anticipating it. So I had to buy needle tips at Lil Weasel, and the one knitting thing that is more expensive in Europe versus the US, at least in the countries I visited, were knitting needles. The needle tips there were like a little, I think like 14.50 euros, which is like, I don't know, like 16, 17 US dollars, which is so expensive to me because I know that the Chiagu prices have gone up in the past few years, but I'm pretty sure even now if I went to like the local yarn store, the needle tips would be like 11 or $12. And when I bought mine, I'm pretty sure they were like in the $10 range. So I cast on the saddle shoulder. I saw my gauge was a little bit tight, but I just didn't want to spend the money on needle tips again. So I fudged around with numbers when I was knitting this, and I'm just hoping that an aggressive block will help. As is, I don't think there will be much, if any, ease on this sweater, but as long as I'm like able to button it closed comfortably, I will be happy. And part of the reason I do want to block it is because I assume that if I aggressively block it horizontally, that will mean I will lose some of my length vertically, because I do like where it is right now, like without the ribbing, because the ribbing would be like another 2 or 3 inches, and that would be like the perfect length for me. When I block it, I don't know how short it's gonna get. Also, this sweater does come with, I think, like a 2x2 knit button band. Same with the Ava cardigan. Oh, I forgot to mention, Ava cardigan I do plan on modifying and doing a double knit button band instead of the 2x2 knit button band, because even though I like the way that the 2x2 knit button band looks, I just think a double knit button band is sturdier. So I may end up doing a double knit button band instead of the button band that is suggested. If this was coming out way too small, I could add like a stitch or two to the width of the button band, and I just don't know how that would look, the double knit button band. So it all comes down to the blocking of this. Like, this is another piece that I've been waiting to block until I filmed this podcast because I didn't want it to be wet when I filmed the podcast. But I'll block my vertices Unite and my socks, and this just like all in one go. So we're not wasting the water and we'll wash. As far as the yarn goes, so one of my goals when I was purchasing yarns was not to buy yarns that I could like easily access at home. And I remembered after I purchased this, technically Brooklyn General Store started carrying this yarn like a year or two ago, so I could easily access it at home. But then I remembered this was significantly cheaper there. I think I saved myself like $20 in total overall buying it there versus here, so I will still consider that a win. It does have quite a lot of yardage for the weight and like the stitch gauge. It is 250 meters for 100 grams, and it is, I think, a merino. Quite a soft, non-superwash wool, and the construction of this yarn actually reminds me a lot of Wool Dreamer's Moda, and I am planning on casting on a test knit relatively soon with that yarn, so probably in my next episode I'll have some better insights on how those two yarns like compare and contrast. I do hope more yarn stores in the US start carrying Durarum Natura yarns, or like at least like local to me. I think Brooklyn General Store is the only one I know of in like the New Jersey, New York area. While I was traveling, whenever I saw Durham Natura, I made sure to like touch and feel the yarn and the knit up samples in store because it's just not like a yarn I see very frequently where I live. And they all felt so nice. So I do hope that more stores local to me in the US start carrying it. Specifically, the silk mohair. Oh my god, it felt so nice. I did buy one ball of it. I'm not sure what I'm going to make with it yet, but that's for a future project video, whatever. My next whip is actually also a cardigan. I didn't think of it as a cardigan, but it technically is a cardigan. Next cardigan work in progress is this little bolero that I freehanded that is inspired by a piece from Heaven by Marc Jacobs that like a ton of celebrities wore. I think it's from like 2 years ago. Because I remember when I first started knitting, that's when that bolero was popular, and I have been wanting to knit a piece inspired by it since then. I didn't follow any pattern for this. It has like a drop shoulder back. I tried to look at like a half knit sweater yoke that I had and tried to kind of mimic that shape. It did end up a little bigger than expected, but that's okay. It is all knit with 2 strands of various Surrey yarns. I don't think there's any mohair in here because I did want it to be next to skin soft, and I do find sometimes mohair can be a bit scratchy. And I just really love the colors. All of this yarn, I should say, besides for 2 of the colors I already had in my stash. The pink and the purple I bought during the New Jersey Wool Walk, and I'm really happy with how the colors came out. The reason why this is not finished is because I bound off the body and then immediately after regretted that decision. Basically, I didn't have darning needles with me, so I couldn't do a sewn bind off. So I just did a regular bind off, and it just doesn't have as much stretch as I need, and it kind of cinches in, which is not the look I was going for. So when it's not as hot outside, I'm going to unpick the bind off. I actually am going to make the ribbing a little bit longer, and then I will do a sewn bind off, and then I'm going to add in a neckline and a button band. I'm actually thinking I might end up just doing like I'm thinking of sewing it down and then adding a faux button band. But on the other hand, I'm like, I already knit all this flat, so what's the point? Might as well just keep the buttons real. I don't think realistically I will wear it open. I will always wear it buttoned up. That is something for future me to deliberate. But this was really fun to knit up, and I've never self-drafted anything before, but it's definitely given me confidence to move forward and self-draft like some other things that I've had in my mind. Oh, and I also did like some very simple intarsia on this project, specifically on the back, and then also there's some intarsia on the sides. That is the last of the cardigans, but like I said, I do have more cardigans that I would like to knit up. I have all those cardigans that I included. Did I include multiple cardigans in my spring knitting plans? I think so. There's like the pressed flowers cardigan that I'd like to knit up, and I'd also like to knit up a butter yellow cardigan. So I foresee more cardigans in my future. Well, I have like the energy and mojo to knit said cardigans because I don't always like knitting flat. Depends what my mindset is, I guess. Okay, that's that. My next sweater work in progress is one you have seen before. It is one that I'd really love to get off the needles this month. Say welcome back to my tessellated pullover by Andrea Murray. This is one of my longest standing whips, as I cast this on last July, and I can't believe it's July again and I'm still working on it, especially because I remember I knit the body of this, because this is a bottom up sweater, I knit the body of this within like days, or like, I'm pretty sure like it took me less than 2 or 3 weeks, which is fast for me considering this is knit on like 3.25 millimeter needles. And then the rest of it has just become a slog. I have started working on sleeve 2 since I came back from my trip, and it's going well, but it's going slowly. So this is a bottom-up construction sweater with a drop shoulder construction, and then you do a 3-needle bind off at the shoulder. You get this like nice shoulder ridge. I really like that as a design detail. The all-over color work is done with mosaic knitting, which means you are only working with one strand of yarn at a time. There's like a main color and then 2 contrast colors. So for my main color, which is this white non-superwash wool, I'm using a Pearl Soho Good Wool in like the undyed natural colorway, and that is just like a loosely plied 2-ply sport weight yarn. They try to sell it as like a light worsted, but don't fall for that. It is purely a sport weight yarn. It's quite thin. And then the 2 contrast colors that I'm using, one is a spin cycle yarn, which is like they're known for their barber pulling yarns, color changing yarns, and it is in the colorway Verba Volant. And then the pink fluffy yarn that I'm using is Moondrake Fua Fua, which is like a 70% cashmere, 30% superwash merino blend, which is so soft and so delightful to use. And the inside of the sweater is also so nice because not only does this colorwork motif look really pretty on the wrong side, but you also still get like nice floats from the slip stitches of the Fua Fua. So it's really soft and delightful. And I'm really looking forward to having the finished object, even if it is taking me forever to finish. So this pattern was released last July, and I'm assuming that this year's Rhinebeck sweater will also be released at some point this month. So that's also why I really want to finish this, so that I can cast on this year's Rhinebeck sweater. Maybe I'll finish it for Rhinebeck, maybe I won't, but I just want to get this one done, so I have at least the option of casting on the new Rhinebeck sweater without feeling like this is just like there in the back of my head being like, you didn't even finish last year's, you know? That is it for the sweater whips that I've been working on. My last whip, I wasn't sure if I should put it under whips or finished objects because I finished sock 1 of this, but I do not plan on casting on and starting sock 2 until I finish the Yarnia sock bingo board, which I was talking about earlier. So these are the June socks by Yuka. So these are pretty basic vanilla socks. Socks? I only have 1 sock. These are a pretty basic vanilla sock pattern. The points of interest is, you can't really see because of my yarn choice color. There is a lateral braid across the top, like when you end the ribbing and start the stockinette part of the foot. There's a lateral braid. There's also an option in the pattern where you can embroider it instead of, like, after you finish the sock instead of knitting it, but I've never done a lateral braid before, so I decided to do that. I've also never embroidered knitting before, so I could have done that too. I was surprised at how long it took me, not because it's difficult, but because you're like constantly moving stitches between the left and right needles, and I think that just eats up time. There is also a pattern heel, slip stitch pattern, but you do get like a little bit of, almost looks like a rib on the heel, which is interesting. And then the reason why I wanted to knit these socks are the tabby toe. Now, this is unblocked and it looks so funny and ugly to me, but when I wear it, it fits, and that's really all that matters. So the tabby toe looks like this. Basically, it is separated for the big toe and the rest of your foot. And one thing I found interesting when I was knitting this, the designer puts like a little bit of ribbing around the beginning of the big toe, so you have like a little bit of stretch. And I specifically knit these to be worn with my tabbies. And I have hesitated to knit tabby socks before because I thought it would be so labor intensive to do the tabby toe, but it really wasn't bad at all. I did both of them on Magic Loop and they worked out pretty quickly. Unlike, I thought it would be kind of like knitting the gusset and like thumb of a glove, which if you have done before can be kind of annoying and it's very much prone to getting holes, but I didn't have that problem. I didn't have that problem with this sock. So I think the way that it's written is well done in that way. And it's kind of funny because as I was working on these socks, I had gone to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. They have like one of the oldest pairs of like knitwear. I think it's those really famous Egyptian socks that also have the toes on them that look like this. So whenever I see this, it just makes me think of like ancient and medieval times as people's socks. I also don't really know how I'm gonna block this. I think I've seen, I don't know if it's like Handmade by Florence, if she did this or some other knitting podcast did this. Basically, they made a cardboard cutout of their sock size, and then they like taped it up, and then they put the wet sock around it to block. So I might try making a cardboard cutout of the tabby foot and blocking it. I don't really know. If you have ideas, please feel free to share, because I'm at a little bit of a loss how I can stretch these out, because they fit me, but I wouldn't mind like a little bit more room in the big toe. Maybe I can just make a little big toe blocker and stick it in there. Or if I have, or maybe I can just like stick like a bottle or something, like a skincare bottle tube in there when it's wet. That should be good enough. I think that's what I'll end up doing instead of trying to make a whole sock blocker. That's the sock. Oh, and the yarn I used for this. Oh my god. I love this yarn so much. This is Cardigan Cash Sock, which is basically like an MCN base. I don't know if it's the same MCN base that like hand dyers use or not, but I love this base. It is a little bit thicker than like other 4-ply sock yarns that I've used. It's quite plump. It's quite soft. I really, really, really like it. And if Beautiful Knitters had been open when I was back in that area, if I had time, I would have totally gone back and bought another skein of this yarn, because it is so, so nice. Oh, it was also pretty affordable for an MCN. I think it was like 14 or 15 pounds, which I think it would basically be like $20. And I think like most MCN bases from hand dyers are usually like a little bit more expensive than regular sock yarns. I've seen them anywhere from like $31 to $35. So yes. And I really, really like this dark brown chocolatey color. This is like my favorite neutral at the moment. As you might be able to tell, as I'm knitting that cardigan also in this colorway. And a similar like dark brown, chocolatey brown colorway. Unfortunately, I do not know where I can get this yarn in the US. I know that Beautiful Knitters does ship to the US, but the shipping is quite expensive. So I'm hoping that, I know there's like one of my favorite yarn stores to shop from internationally is Garntopia in Oslo, because they just do flat rate shipping. So if you buy a lot of yarn, it makes sense to do it from there, because the shipping cost is flat. And if they carry this yarn, the next time I place an order from them, I will definitely be buying more, because it's so lovely. I am curious to see how it works, how it like wears. Part of the reason I was hesitant to buy MCN sock yarn in the past, like from hand dyers, is I just assumed with the extra softness, maybe it would be more prone to pilling, but this feels quite sturdy, especially with the 4-ply construction. So is this sock, June sock by Yuka in Cardigan Cash Sock. The last section we have today is acquisitions, and it's more, I guess, of like a teaser sneak peek for a future video, because I have bought a lot of yarn over the last month. This is only like a third of it. Back down. I just don't know how interesting it would be if I was just like, this is this yarn, this is this yarn, this is this yarn, with no like context or information on what I plan on knitting it, all that kind of stuff. So instead, what I'm planning on doing is, hopefully my next video will be a sort of chatty travel vlog where I will share some clips of the places that I visited, what I saw, some of my favorite things that I ate, as well as clips of the yarn stores that I visited, as well as the yarn that I bought and what I plan on making with it. I've never edited a travel vlog before, so I don't really know how it will work out. If you have like any preferences or requests, like please do let me know. Most of the yarn that I bought was in single skeins to hopefully come together in a bigger colorwork project. I also did get 3 sweater quantities of yarn. One of them, this is not all of it, but I had to get a sweater quantity of this Kinross 4-ply. If you watch the Cardigans podcast, you've probably heard of this yarn before. In my mind, this is like Rebecca's yarn, because she's talked about it so much, how she enjoys it. So I had to get some yarn. I mean, I was already planning on getting this yarn because of Rebecca's podcast, but when I saw it in store and I touched the sample, I had to get it even more. One of the sweater quantities And yeah, the rest of the yarn I will talk about in that video. Otherwise, that is all it for me today. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I also wanted to say thank you to everybody who left really fun comments on my last knitting podcast video. In that video, I said, like, please feel free to share what you are knitting on while you watch this episode. And not only did people share what they were knitting on, but there were also people crocheting, sewing. I think there was like, was it cross stitching or embroidery, something like that. It's been like 2 months since I responded to those. It's been like 2 months since I responded to those comments, so I don't remember them off the top of my head. But I remember having a lot of fun looking up all the patterns that people were mentioning. So again, please feel free to tell me what you worked on while watching this episode, because I am nosy and I just love seeing that, and I guess reading that and looking up those projects. That's truly the end of this podcast. Thanks again for watching. Happy knitting, and hope to see you again next time. Bye.